Good evening, guys. I'm Chris, and welcome to this Wednesday's episode of Rift Amps. So, just finished putting together final assembly on this Ainsley Lister signature combo. This one is off to America. I've no idea where, but it's been purchased through our dealer in California, Bananas at Large. So, whoever is getting this one, thank you very much for your order. I really appreciate it. It's a killer amp. Ainsley signed it off the other day. Really happy with it. I just need to give it a final clean. Then I can wrap it all up, box it all up, get UPS booked, and it should be in California this time next week. Q&A time. So thank you so much to everyone that watched both the weekly update video on Sunday and then our August bank holiday bonus video that I put out on Monday. Seems a lot of you like that style of content, so maybe I'll do more of that in the future. But it was fun just to kind of film, a good chunk of amp building, especially with some of the time-lapse stuff. It came out really cool. I was really happy with that. So thank you to everyone who commented and tuned in and watched. It was really fun to do and I really enjoyed it. So anyway, we've had loads of questions and comments. First thing is we need to address the video that I put out before all of that, which included my rant about all the cancellations that I've had so far this August. Yes, thank you to everyone who commented and gave advice. I really appreciate it. The difficulty that we have is that there is, by law, a 14-day cooling off period for anyone who orders anything online. It's called distance selling regulations. So if somebody places an order within 14 days, they're more than welcome to cancel it. That's the law. Can't do anything about that. People have a right to change their mind, and that's fine. And as I did say in that video, I also have a right, however, to keep any of those transaction fees or any losses that I incur by processing that refund. So that's fine. But what I am going to do, I think, is I am going to tighten up my T's and C's a little bit more. And I am going to put on all of the invoices for those deposits. I take a 50% deposit when someone orders, which should be large enough to make people think, it's a big commitment, I'm doing this. But not always, not all the time. Things happen. Is that FedEx? I'm waiting on FedEx to arrive. Anyway, so yeah, we're just going to tighten that up, make it a bit more clear. And I'm going to. So I'll put on all the invoices that I send out for deposits, non-refundable. And then, because I don't mind if you cancel, but it's when people have paid and then I have to refund where I incur those costs. But so if people want to, it's not a problem if someone places an order and then backs out before they pay the deposit, because it doesn't cost me anything. It's just, press a button on the back end of the website and it cancels it. But when there's money involved, that's when it gets expensive. So yeah. But anyway, thank you to everyone who commented on that. What am I doing today? Lots of other things. Do you remember the blue cap for the Vox that was listed as black? And I hate bright blue and bright orange components in vintage amps. So I didn't have the right size heat shrink, because I said I was going to try and heat shrink that over in black to make it look good. So I had to order some absolutely massive 50mm heat shrink. This stuff is ridiculous. I only ordered half a metre of it because that's all I'll ever need. But just to compare to the standard 4.5mm stuff that I use, you can see the difference. It's just crazy how big this stuff is. So I'm going to snip some off to do the can cap. It's 2-to-1 ratio, so it should shrink down to 25mm. Now the multi-section cap that I bought is 25.1mm. It's slightly over, so I'm going to try and do it in that as well. But if it's quite a loose fit, once it's shrunk down, then we'll look at a different option. But That's what I'm doing there. And so, okay, first question was from BMacQ that says, "Hi Chris, great videos. I am enjoying every one of them. Well done." Well, thank you very much. I always appreciate everyone who tunes in and comments. Welcome to the channel. We've got a pretty nice community here now, people who comment and discuss things in the comment section of the video, so you're welcome. Can I ask, the bass amp, will it have an extension jack to connect to second cabinet? Short answer, yes it will. I'm going to do it with an impedance selector, so we're going to have 2, 4 and 8 ohm on a selector, rotary selector, with 2 speaker outputs. So you will be able to connect on 2, 4, 8 any single combination of those, plus 2 16s for 8, 2 8s for 4 and 2 4s for 2. So yes, it will have that. Quick update on the RK50 build, Ed's amp. I've got the board material cut down now, so I've printed off the board layout, and I'm just about to drill. I use it as essentially a drilling template. So I'm going to drill all my eyelets in place. Then we can get the eyelets installed, swaged in, and then I can start populating this board. Ken Jepson asks 2 questions. But first, a few questions he says, but first, thank you for your always good and instructive videos. You're welcome, Ken. I've been looking for a puncture for IEC sockets, but can't find them. Where do you buy those? Well, that's because they're not usually available on the retail market. They are a commercial tool, so you have to go to a specialist to get them. And I'll tell you now, Ken, they're not cheap. They are eye-wateringly expensive. You know, in your head, imagine what an expensive tool will cost. Triple it, easy. I will put a link to show you how much my tool costs today, so you'll be able to see. But yeah, they are expensive. It's the type of tool that you used to be able to go to like a machine shop and hire for single use. But obviously, I'm a commercial operation. You know, I use that tool 250, 300 times a year, easy. So it's paid for itself 100 times over by now. But yeah, you generally can't buy them from your standard places. So you've got to go to a specialist to get them. And second question, why don't I use radial capacitors? They are far better and cheaper. Well, Ken, we've actually answered this question a number of times now. First things first, they are far better. No, they're not. If you think they are, please put a link in your comment section to peer-reviewed academic research that shows that radial caps are better than axial. And of course, please define what you mean by better. Do you mean lower ESR? Do you mean better performance? Do you mean longevity? What do you mean by better? But as we've already answered this already, I'm telling you now, for the guitar market and the audiophile market, it's simply not the case. And cheaper, yeah, possibly cheaper, but does that mean they're better or higher quality? Who knows? So yeah, again, I've answered this question a million times. You're free to go back and look at my other Q&A sections where we talk about axial versus radial. It was about 15, 16 years ago now where people used to say axials were becoming obsolete and going out of thing, but actually the whole market's gone the other way, and there's more available from more suppliers, more manufacturers in more values, so we've got more choice than ever. Just had the absolute nicest guy drop in both of his amp heads, which unfortunately are not working. So he's got some gigs coming up, he's got a recording studio session booked, and his amps have gone down. He's a metal player. So the first one is a Marshall JCM 900 dual reverb, model number 4100. Now this one, he says the clean channel, or channel A as they call it, doesn't work at all, completely dead. He's not sure if there's any hiss or anything like that, but the second channel works absolutely fine, but the clean channel, channel A, does not work at all. So we need to find out why that is. Haven't had a 900 in for a while, so that'd be fun. Be interesting to get inside, have a look, see what's going on. His second amplifier is the PV6505 Plus. Very popular metal amplifier. This one, he says both channels are dead. One went down and then A little time later, the second one died too. So now both of amps are not working right. It's time to get them sorted. So we're going to have to get this one apart, look inside, see what's going on. Now, when he actually contacted me, I said to him, as I always do to all my customers, if you've got a modern-ish Marshall, it's always quicker and cheaper to take it into Marshalls themselves if you can, because their service department is fantastic. Well, he contacted Marshall and they told him no, they're not interested. They said they're only taking on warranty work now. So I don't know what the reason was, but that's just bizarre as far as I'm concerned, because Marshall won't sell me parts, but also won't service my customers' amps. I mean, what is that about? Marshall, sort yourselves out. You've got a lot to learn from Blackstar. Anyway, PV shouldn't be a problem. We'll work out what's going on with it. Same with the Marshall. We'll get this guy up and running and sorted and back playing. Martin Reed 1740 says, very nice to see the amount of detail and thought that you put into your amp builds. Well, it's what people pay me for. It's what I enjoy to do. It's how I like to build amplifiers. I'm not interested in building things quickly. I'm not interested in building things, to a price point. I don't care about bean counters. I want to try and build the best quality amplifier I can, and I want to do it all as much as myself. I want to do it as much as I can. So, as little outsourcing as possible. And it's how I want to do business, and my customers approach me and buy from me for those reasons. So, if I wanted to be a millionaire in this industry, I've said it loads of times before, I would have a PCB design made in the Far East, and if you can make a 40-watt amplifier and retail it for £600 sterling, about $800 US, you'll make a lot of money very quickly. But that's not what I want to do. I want to sit at the top end of the market, hand wiring, hand making amplifiers to the best standard that I can. He asks, do I work in metric and imperial? Yes, I do. It's not by choice. It's because that's how the whole industry works. It's because obviously a lot of the American stuff is imperial, a lot of the UK stuff and European stuff is metric, but here in the UK we've always been a mix of both, but this industry in particular uses both kind of interchangeably sometimes. So we get obviously metric, so millimeters, centimeters. You get inches, but here's the funny thing, right? You get the fractional inches, so you might say, well, that chassis is 17.5 inches wide, but also we get decimal inches, where we say, well, that's 17 and 350 thousandths, right? And because sometimes you do work to a thousandth of an inch. Now, I, as a Brit, I do... I've slowly moved over to imperial as to what I prefer working in, especially when you're doing chassis layouts and things, because imperial is very easy to half something. So you might have, for example, 5/8 is a fractional inch, right? So 10 and 5/8, well, to half that is easy. Half the 10 to 5, and the 5/8 you just double the second number. So half of 5/8 is 5/16. So half of 10 and 5/8 is 5 and 5/16. Easy. And I can do that very quickly now, especially when you're using a ruler and you're finding center points. Because I also do my own race engine builds when I'm working and building and assembling car engines, we work to a thousandth of an inch. You always work in imperial in engines anyway. So I'm quite used to that. Metric is useful because a lot of my suppliers here in the UK still work in metric and don't work in imperial, so you have to be able to convert. But it is a funny old thing. The whole industry is a mix and match. So my 9-pin sockets are imperial. I have to drill or punch a 3/4 inch hole for the Noval sockets. Yet the octal sockets, they're 26 millimeters. They're not 1 inch, which would be 25.4 mil. They are 26. So you have to learn to work in both, which is why it does seem bizarre We have a running joke on this channel that we should go back to British imperial measurements, barley corns and poppy seeds, that sort of thing, hectares, whatever. But you know, yeah, it's you have to learn to work in both. It's the whole industry. It's bizarre. It's just bizarre. I had a Marshall faceplate that I had to clone the other day. You'd think it'd be metric, but actually the whole spacing was imperial. So, yeah, got to learn to work in both. Actually, and that comes on to a second point from Arthur Gordon 6072. He says, "Funny how you Brits can't make up your mind if you measure in metric and imperial. Come on, get with the program. Metric is the only way." Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? The thing is, maybe it's not us making up our mind. Maybe it's you lot not making up your mind and us having to adapt to everything. So cut the heat shrink to size, and there's going to be a little bit of blue showing, but I think that'll be okay, because if I shift it this way and hide the top, this side is buried under the clamp anyway, so I think, at least from the side angle, the side view, that'll be okay. What do you think? Chris Phillips 9385 talking about the Ed's RK50 build. So satisfying to watch an artist work. Well, thank you. That's very kind. Nice also that you did not edit out the cap cans struggle. Well, it's actually a running joke with somebody. They're just a nightmare. The cap cans themselves, they are 35mm. But the clamps seem to change dimension and hole spacing all the time. And so I actually left that in for somebody who watches this channel and knows the struggle. So, but I'm glad you picked up on that as well. It is funny. Can you detail power supply with the 12-volt winding? Are you planning dual rail bipolar regulated supply for that, or just a simple diode rectifier? I'm doing a bridge rectifier with a very high value cap to smooth it out. It's the switching circuit is just all that is a 12-volt supply for a transistor that sits in the switching circuit, in the boost circuit, sorry. So that's all that is. So it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It just so happens that that transformer I selected had a 12-volt winding on it, and so I can rectify it into DC, filter it and use it relatively simply. I haven't got to go off my high voltage rail and step it all down and do all that. So yeah, that's all it is. Just a very simple 12-volt DC supply for the transistor that sits in the boost circuit. Vox AC10 Progress. The both of those caps are now installed. So for the multi-section can, I decided not to cover it in heat shrink because the original one was also blue. So, yeah. The 225 microfarad caps still test good, but so I'm going to fire it up and test and see how it performs on the bench, and then I'll swap those out if required. The large multi-section can, bad news, I'm afraid. The actual chassis hole is almost bang on 35mm. So by the time I put that large heat shrink on it, it wouldn't actually go through. So best laid plans and all that, not going to work. We're just going to leave it there. Thankfully, it's not visible when the chassis is in the amplifier. So that's what we're going to have to do on that one. Just about to stick it on the bench, fire it up, see how this thing performs. That Hughes chap says, that was a great watch. Thoroughly enjoyed the time lapse. My question would be, are there some golden rules when considering the reduction of noise in amp design and build? Apologies if this had been asked before. Keep up the great work. Yes, there are. There are always some golden rules. Now, some of you who watch this channel will know this already, but as most of you who watch this channel are not technically focused, and you know I try and keep the jargon at the minimum, I am going to explain what the rules of thumb are with chassis layout and design. So bear with me. So the main rule that you need to be aware of is or the main consideration, I think, is a better way of explaining that, is to be aware of where exactly in the amplifier the noisy bits are, but also where in the amplifier the most sensitive parts of the audio circuit are too. And you want to separate those two things as far away as you can from each other. So typically in a chassis, this is an undrilled one yet, but I'll use it as a great example. Typically you'll find the inputs where you input your guitar, you plug your guitar in, up in one corner, maybe all the way over here, which is where I tend to do them. But because that's the most sensitive part of the circuit. And as far away from that point as physically possible, in this case it would be diagonally opposite down here, you'll find your mains input, where your mains electricity comes in. Because even, in the Western world, in 2024, our mains voltage is still incredibly dirty, incredibly noisy, and has all these little artifacts on it and all these things that cause problems. So, and what we don't want to happen is the really sensitive part of the circuit which is designed to pick up the tiny signal that comes out of your guitar pickups. We don't want that hearing or picking up or sensing all of the noisy stuff from the mains. So that's why they're always as far opposite as possible. Now, depending on your chassis layout and design, if your mains input comes in there, you've probably got a switch there. You've got your mains transformer, usually that side as well. You might have an on-off switch, maybe on the front panel. Sometimes it's on the rear, like those old Fenders. But again, that whole noisy section, the main supply, the power supply, is as far away from your sensitive preamp as possible. And so that's generally your rule of thumb, is wherever you've got preamp, your small 9-pin valves usually, those and any associated wires and components are as far away from your mains as possible. And so that's what we're always doing, and we can look at various examples of that. So this is the RK50 build that I'm doing. Same chassis. Here's my mains input here. It's an IEC socket, and I've got all the way at the far end is my mains input. So my guitar input. If you look on a Fender style amplifier, whether that be a tweed or a black panel or anything like that, you'll see a similar thing going on. And so that's what you're doing. So whenever you're laying out your design, you're always thinking, right, if that's the noisy bit, that's where it's sensitive, let's keep those two separate. We will probably do a bit more on this at some point. But yes, that's a really good question. But if you always look at my amp designs or someone else's, you'll see that where your guitar plugs in is physically as far away from where the mains plugs in as possible. Bad news, I'm afraid. The Vox AC10 fired up on the bench is not healthy at all. All the voltages inside the amplifier are okay. They're not exactly where I want them, but they're okay. They're not bad. But we're driving the normal channel, which is this one, tone on 0, and I'm only getting 2.6 volt RMS output into 8 ohms anymore, and we start to clip, so that's our clean. 2.6 into 8 ohms, 0.8, well, 2.5 volts AC gives us 0.8 watts. That's not a healthy amplifier. Oh dear. Now, what I've done is I've gone through... There are two schematics online. I've been comparing the two of them. They both seem to be pretty close, so this one's easier to read. Having signal traced through the amplifier, we get equal signal input into both output valves, and a good signal output coming out of both anodes. Sorry, here you go. These are the anodes. Into the output transformer. But what's coming out of the output transformer is a very, very low signal level. So that's not good. That's not good at all. Just to be sure, these are the original EL84s that the amp came into me with. I've just swapped in a new set of replacements just to double check. Not those. So what do we think is going on? Well, two things I noticed is that this particular amplifier has two 8-ohm speakers, and they are currently wired in series for a total load of 16 ohms. And if we look at the output transformer, we've got two taps. We've got an 8-ohm tap and a 15-ohm tap. The 15 ohm is green and the 8 ohm is brown. Okay. We come over to the amplifier, and you can see, and I've gone back and checked to how it was when the amplifier came in, that the brown wire was used, which is the 8 ohm tap, and the 16 ohm tap was unused. In fact, there's not even a screw in there. So this amp has been running a 16 ohm load into an 8 ohm tap for who knows how long. So at this moment in time, I suspect we have a dead output transformer. Not good at all. So how do I go ahead and prove that? Well, I don't have a AC10 output transformer on the shelf, which is this lay down style one here, but I do have something suitable. It says on this schematic that the RA to A is 8K. Well, I've got those on the shelf, so I can sub something in quickly just to test. So we'll clip it in with some leads, and if our output comes back, then we know we've got a knackered output transformer, which is not good news, because this amplifier deserves better, to be honest. Very frustrating. It is still passing signal, but it's very low output and it does not sound good. Now, I have also tested the vibrato channel and it does wobble. It's low output as well, but the speed and the amplitude controls are not working as expected. So even once we get this low output issue sorted, we've still got to fix all that. So it's not looking positive at the moment, but let's get a transformer subbed in, see if we can prove our theory. Cool, loads of questions this week. Michael Smith, is the chassis made of aluminium or steel? The IEC punch made quick work of cutting out the hole for the socket, so I'm assuming aluminium. Yes, that's an aluminium chassis, but that punch cuts through the steel chassis just as quickly. It's incredible. It's one of those tools that if you do this for a living, you should buy straight away, because it saves so much time and faff. Replacement output transformer subbed in, and it's made no difference. Still putting out hardly any wattage. So I'm quite confused now, because something's not right. And I'm not sure what it is. So I'm going to have to think hard about this as to why we get good signal flow all the way through up to the output valves, out of the output valves, but on the output of the output transformer, it's very weak. There's nothing else there. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. And all the other voltages and things in the amplifier appear to be okay. So, gonna have to have a good think about this. And finally, 74 canal on the Red Plate Demo vid said, "This loop sounds like Danish Pete." Good ears, mate. Yeah, it is. It's Danish Pete. He was very kind and recorded 10, 12 loops for me to test amplifiers with. Ainsley did some too, so I've got a nice selection of loops. But yeah, they're Danish Pete. He put together some really cool examples. You can tell it's his playing, but what a great way to test your amplifiers with, pro players running through them all the time. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you very much for watching once again. As always, please give this video a thumbs up. All your comments, questions down below. Subscribe, notification bell, join the channel like these guys have, and I will catch you all at the next one.